and welcome to episode 2 of Role Play Pro, the podcast for tabletop entrepreneurs, creators, and fans. I'm Courtney Stover of Lightheart Adventures, and in this podcast, we talk to the creators behind the brands in the tabletop roleplay gaming space about who they are and how they're turning their passion for gaming into a career. In today's interview, I have the privilege of chatting with Nix of MC Etching. Nix creates gorgeous etchings on glass and many other materials that pay tribute to some of our favorite games. A personal favorite of mine are his class-specific glasses like Bard, Druid, and Paladin. But one of the things that I really appreciate about Nix is his extremely positive attitude and his passion for the RPG community. If you follow him on Twitter, you'll know that he's your favorite punkle and always just a shining beacon in our feeds. Right off the bat in this episode, he actually offers some really wise words about how important it is to connect with the community that you're trying to work within. So one quick word before we jump into this interview. Last week, we spoke with David Darris, the owner of Dice Envy, one of my favorite dice companies. They are an affiliate of ours, so if you haven't had a chance to listen to that episode, I highly encourage you to do so, and then go check them out. And then when you do, if you use code LightheartADV, you'll get 10% off your order, you'll support an amazing company, and you'll help support the show. Let's jump into this episode with Nix. All right, welcome back. Today, I have the extreme privilege to introduce you to one of the kindest people in the TTRPG space. Nix is here with us today, and he is the owner and really talented artist of MC Etching, where he creates gorgeous etch designs on glassware, ornaments, and tokens, sells them on his Etsy shop. So welcome, Nix. How are you today?
I'm good.
Glad to hear it. Really just want to kind of dive right in. What is the Nix story?
How far back do we want to go? Are we deep diving? Tell me about your childhood.
I mean, we can. One day I was nothing more than a thought. How did you get into the gaming space?
The gaming space? Well, I've always been a bit of a gamer. Let's see. Let me think. When did I really first start? I think it was probably in the early 90s. I started hanging around and just, kind of checking out the gaming spaces and whatnot. I haven't done a lot of TTRPG playing. For the longest time, I've told this story a few times. I avoided a lot of the TTRPG space because my first experience with Dungeons and Dragons was literally like that stereotypical misogynistic, racist, just horrible experience. I literally flipped the table.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And just and bounced. And when just I stayed away from it for the most part for 25 years, just because I thought that was an accurate representation. And now I'm really mad that I was lied to, that wasn't the entirety of the space. A fair amount of just wargaming, Warhammer, stuff like that. Never got too heavily invested. Always had friends that had stuff, so I never really bought a lot of my own. But I always loved, I don't know, just the entire concept of just the whole gaming thing. I've always loved RPG video games and stuff like that. And so I always I would buy the books and look at the art, but I would never really play a lot. A little bit of World of Darkness stuff in the mid 90s, back when it was, it was pretty much just Operation Edgelord all the time. A tiny bit of, I accidentally found a Vampire the Masquerade LARP group in the town I was living in.
Oh.
Yeah, I literally was I was going to get food one night and came around the corner at the local college, and there was a bunch of people either dressed as bikers or as business people, and they were just aggressively Rochambeauing at each other. And I was like, oh, this looks fun. So that was a side quest for a while.
So did you just go over right at that second and join in and ask?
Yeah, I was just like, what? I was just like, so what y'all doing? And I just kind of got roped into it, and did that for 6 months.
That's awesome. What brought you back into playing?
I think a lot of people that got brought into it, it was Well, the genesis of it was really Will Wheaton's tabletop. Because I got laid off from my job and I was unemployed for a while. And Lordy, I think this was mid 2010-ish, 2011-ish. And so that's when I really tried to do the glass etching thing, because I've done it for like as a hobby for 20 years. But I was like, you know what, I'm going to do the thing. And I went out and got the semi-professional equipment. So I was spending a lot of time in my garage. And I was starting to incorporate computers more and digital design into my glass etching, because before I did all my images on like a light table. So I just started watching like YouTube documentaries and stuff like that just to have noise in the so it felt like I had coworkers. And I've been a longtime Will Wheaton fan, so when I found their stuff, like I latched in pretty hard with that. And then when they started talking about Critical Role, I was like, oh, there are a few episodes into this Critical Role thing. I'll give it a shot. And boy, did they set that hook. I think like the fourth episode of campaign 1 is when I went back to episode 1 and started watching from the beginning. And I went through that whole campaign and just like, just sitting in my garage, cranking out glass pieces, just listening to them in the background.
Yeah, that's really fun. And like, you got in really early for that too. Like it's a lot harder to kind of discover Critical Role now and go back like, all right, let's just spend hundreds of hours catching up real quick.
Yeah, it's become an empire. And it's one of those things is just like, I just kind of like, I stumbled across it because of Will Wheaton stuff. And that gang is real good at setting that hook.
Yes, they are.
And so from there, it just kind of branched out to, I'd had a Twitter account for, I don't know how old my Twitter account is, but it was dormant. I would occasionally tweet about pieces that I had put on Etsy, and like I had none followers. I had no idea what I was doing. And then it was like I said, I got laid off and I spent a lot of time alone. And I just, I ended up hitting some depression walls, a lot of anxiety issues. And so one of those things where it's just, when I hit situations like that, I kind of go back to basics and kind of just reinvent myself from the ground up. And it's one of those things I've done it a few times in my life where I'm just like, all right, this path isn't working. I'm going to need to, take it down to the fundamentals of like who I am and what's not, like the core of me. And then look at who do I want to be? What kind of person do I want to be? And what do I got to do to get there? And so I just invested in the community that I found on Twitter, and just started participating.
Yeah.
And it has gone surprisingly well. It's a bit overwhelming sometimes.
Like, that's interesting. It really takes a lot of courage to say that, like, I'm not happy with how my life is right now and I want to change and actually make that change.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's one of those things when you see yourself do it the first time and you realize you have the capacity to affect great change on yourself. It really is an eye-opening experience. Like, I grew up in a mountain town where like it was literally my entire school had like 20 people in it. And it's like early on, I was the overweight kid who didn't play sports ball in the town that loved sports ball. I read comic books. I was the consummate nerd. And so, just that whole backstory of just like severely bullied, severely picked on. And I didn't like anything about anything. And I ended up, because of all of that, I got sent to live with my biological father and moved to still a small town, but slightly bigger. I mean, it was a city as far as I was concerned. And just one of those things where I realized like I'm walking in fresh. I can like, they have no idea who I am. Like I can just be that person that I want to be. And, once you realize you can do that, like you can just be the person you want to be. If you want to be a kinder person, be a kinder person. If you want to be a person that makes friends, it's hard to take those first steps when you're used to being so isolated and you're used to people reacting negatively to your presence. Gathering that courage for that first run at interacting with people that you've never interacted with before, the potential landmine of that, once you can get over that and just kind of dive into it, and you realize that you can just change on a fundamental level like that, and just like, oh, okay, here we go.
Yeah, it's that whole like, if you want to be happy, even if you're not, just start acting like you are. Or it's like, if you want to be a nicer person, even if you're annoyed by everyone, just start it. Like, just be that way. And eventually it'll become more normal for you.
Well, it's one of those things too, is just like, I made that decision of just like, I want to be the kindness that I never got, and I just started, for me, Twitter, a lot of it is there. A lot of people wear their heart on their sleeve out there because they think they're just putting it out into the void, and they don't expect the void to give a damn. They're just kind of dropping it out there. But when you look at folks and they're obviously in pain, and you stop and take a moment and go, well, I've been in this kind of pain before. What did I wish somebody would say and or do for me? And just take a minute and talk to someone on a human level, and just be like, even if you can't directly help them, just be like, I hear you. Like, the void cares.
Yeah, that's great. So I know you started a Twitch channel. What was kind of the impetus? Was it kind of wanting to do the same thing of being able to connect with people more like you have been on Twitter? Like, how did that get started?
A lot of people really pushed me to do it, because I a lot of people were just like, wow, what you do is really interesting, and I don't think I could ever. And I'm like, no, literally anybody can do this. Like, literally anybody can do this. And it was just like, you know what, I'm just gonna show you. Like, I'm gonna do, because I started the Twitch channel, and I did a couple of live streams where I'm like, look, this is all I do. It's not overly fancy. It requires a little bit of equipment and some rudimentary skills. And people were more enamored with just like the outlandishness of me, I guess. And I did a podcast a long time ago, when I was 20 and just like had no clue about anything, what was going on. Just that dreadful, edgelord 20-year-old white kid. Ugh. God. Oh God, I was that guy for a spell. And and I've always I've been in drama class. I had a radio show in high school for a little while. And so I feel very comfortable in this, and I'm a talker. And so it just kind of grew out of that. People just wanted the space to come and hang out. And I needed coworkers, honestly. I needed to feel like I was in a workplace again, just because spending hours in your garage isolated, at first it's really liberating. And you're like, I could do whatever I want. I'm at work in my sweatpants. Nobody, you can do whatever you want. And after a while, you're just like, God, I miss the sound of people. I've literally found crowd tracks just to put that, office ambiance, just to put that on, to feel like there's other human beings around.
Honestly, that makes sense. I've worked remotely for a couple of years now. And so sure, with the pandemic, adjustment wasn't that bad, but it was still I would go to a coffee shop just to be somewhere and be around people. So I totally get that.
Yeah, because I'm a very much like a cafe denizen. Just I like that background murmur of just happy people doing things. And just I really enjoy interacting with people. And so to just go from working with, I was a department manager where I was working. I had my main building, and I oversaw 2 other satellite buildings, and just because I worked for the local newspaper in the insertion and distribution department. So my crew on 2 shifts, we put all of the ads into the paper, and then we sent them out the door to the carrier. So I'm working with my crew, I'm working with other newspapers crew, I'm working with independent contractors, and then I went to me and a dog. And so it was a bit of a culture shock being that alone.
Yeah. So I do kind of want to dig a little bit more into what it is that you do and what you're creating. you mentioned that you were kind of doing this etching as a hobby. Like, how did that start? Like, how did you first learn how to do this?
I started in high school. My father had a friend who primarily did stained glass, but she also did a little bit of glass etching. And I did that, work for a family friend for a summer thing, basically like the short apprenticeship. And I never did take with the stained glass work, but she had a sandblaster and she was like, well, let's try some glass etching. And I really, really just grabbed onto that. I've always had a thing for just like iconography. So I just really, and at first it was just mirrors. Once I got, and I didn't really do much of anything with it until I got laid off. And I was like, okay, I'm going to see exactly how I can just absolutely MacGyver this into other things. Cause like I said, when I started, I was using like tracing paper, a light box to do all my images. So it was super time consuming. And it was really hard with respect to repeating designs with accuracy. I was like, well, I'm decent with a computer and I've got a little bit of self-taught graphics editing knowledge. Like, I wonder if there's a way I could make my own, because this is pre home-based like Cricut cuts. This is like way pre Cricut cut. So I just started working with, I started with GIMP, the free graphics editing software, and just started making stuff and printing it to sticky back vinyl, and I putting it on glass and hand cutting it all with an X-Acto knife.
Wow.
Yeah, I think I put like maybe 20,000 pieces through my sandblaster hand cut.
That's impressive.
Yeah, and I still do hand cut from time to time because I found a lot of my more detailed images. I'm leaving bits of vinyl behind that's like the size of a human hair, and these desktop cutters just won't do it.
So you start doing this. You're doing all this etching by hand, and then you get laid off and decide that you want to see that if you can make this into something. Like, kind of, what were the steps that you took to really start it as more of a business?
Well, I was lucky because after I got laid off from the paper and I was like, I'm going to do this, and it didn't really pan out because I didn't know how to business. Like, I still don't, but I like at the time I really, really didn't know how to do the business. And so I ended up getting another job like 5 years after I got laid off. I got a job at the Big Blue hardware store. And then I got laid off from that place. No, I left that job for what I thought was a better job, which ended up being just horrifically abusive workspace. And at that point, like, I had really started, I had gotten I was at about 4,000 followers on Twitter, and I was getting more and more involved in the community. So when I got let go because of the pandemic, I was like, well, here we go. Like, I've got enough of a base that I've built up that I can see, let me see if I can do this. One thing I always tell everybody, if you want to sell to a community, you got to be part of the community. You can't just bust in the door and be like, buy my stuff. I'm like, that's what I tried years ago, and it doesn't work. Like, nobody, you get actively pushed back against when you just show up on a scene and you're like, whoop, buy my stuff.
Yeah, it's like, here's this tool.
Yeah, I mean, you just look like Walmart at that point. If you want to sell to a community, you got to be part of, I say it all the time, it's community over profit. And that's just 100% where I've been for the last few years. Is just, if I turn a profit, great. As long as my bills are paid, that's really all I'm here for. My biggest thing is just community outreach and interaction. That's what I care about. I mean, that's my main focus, and my business just kind of is the thing I use to fund that.
So you're selling things on Etsy. What was kind of the thought process or reasoning on why you picked Etsy to be your storefront?
At the time, it was because Etsy was just coming into existence.
Okay.
and I really didn't do a lot of business with it. I mean, it was just I just arbitrarily picked that one because everybody seemed to fit my niche of just like handmade. And at the time, I wasn't doing any like made to order stuff. It was primarily just I made a thing, I would put it on there and maybe sell it. Coming out of it with what I'm doing now, Etsy is becoming more and more restrictive as to what I can do on it as a platform and how I sell things and structure my listings. But it was one of those things where it's like, well, this seems to be picking up, so I'll just jump on with this at the beginning and see where it goes. I think it was pretty much that just like, that crafty aspect to it kind of hooked me. And I was like, all right, well, that's what I do, so we'll give it a go.
Yeah, that makes sense. So are you thinking about kind of branching out beyond Etsy, or have you kind of already dipped your toes in some other areas?
See, I don't know. It's one of those things that's the hard part about being a one-person operation is just trying to, I have no idea about website stuff. I'd like to maybe move to my own storefront, but I don't know the best way to do that. I don't know if it would be better than Etsy or the same and kind of bad in a different way. So it's one of those things where it's like, well, this is working for me now. So I'm one of those, like, I guess I'll just hang here until something literally falls in my lap and I go, oh, this is better.
Fair enough. Can you talk a little bit about the products that you're making now? And then if they're like, did you start off making the same thing as the beginning? Has there been some kind of like evolution, and just kind of what that process has looked like over time?
Well, it's always been nerd stuff in one form or another. One thing I used to do a lot of was I do a lot of portraits on pint glasses. So I would do a lot of character portraits. At the time when I first started, it was Firefly. Oh, Firefly cast for days.
Nice.
I had an entire set, a glass with every cast member, and then one glass with the ship.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
It was one of those things where it's just like, at some point because I never did international shipping because I was just terrified of it. I got a message from a person in Australia that was like, look, I really want this entire set. How do we make that happen? And they paid $100 in shipping. And I had to ship 13 pounds of glass to Australia. I'd never been more anxiety ridden in my life until the day they sent me an email and said, it's here and they're all fine.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But it was always nerd stuff. Usually it was like vaguely comic book, a lot of like a lot of stuff you see on Etsy. It's a lot of bootleg stuff, a lot of knockoff stuff. And I've moved away from that more and more as I've embraced my ability to graphically design, because I have never been formally trained or anything like that. I just started playing with my own imagery because the idea of is Superman logos on stuff all day. It's IP theft. I mean, there's no beating around the bush at the end of the day. And it's just like, look, I need to get away from this. I need to stop making bootleg stuff. I can probably come up with my own designs. Let's start playing with it. And the TTRPG stuff like really allowed me to kind of flourish in that, because you could take a lot of basic shapes. And if you're a gamer, like, what a D20 silhouette looks like you just. And so it allowed me to kind of really try on those pants of, being an actual, I still don't consider myself a graphic designer. I just kind of throw stuff together and people like it.
Do you have some kind of process that you try to follow for getting inspiration for new designs?
I look at the details on the stuff around me, because I'm obsessed with things like filigree, iconography, little marks on things, and I'll see like a little design swirl in something that'll catch my eye and be like, okay, now what if we extrapolate on that? And what if we build in some of this? And what if we add in some of that? or I'll start with a baseline of like, what do I want to put on what do I want the focus of this to be? Do I want it to be a D20? Do I want it to be, dice? Do I want it to be something else? And then what do I want to put around? What do I want to decorate it with? What theme am I going for? Am I going like for an Art Nouveau look, something like that? And anytime my brain just randomly spits something fun at me, I try and write it down. That happens a lot. Just my brain just goes, what if? And I'm grasping for a pen.
Do you hold like a lot of inventory on hand? Are you kind of making things to order? Like once you come up with something that you think is going to be a best, like, or be a popular seller, like how does that kind of work for you?
Generally, with a lot of stuff, I'll prototype a new idea. I'll make one just so I can get photographs, and then I'll throw it up there. And if there's a good response, I'll kind of promo it more, and I do made to order. I'm going to start carrying an inventory. I was supposed to this year start selling at local conventions, but
Yeah.
So once that's a thing again, I'm gonna start keeping. But it's been good because I'm able to track my online sales of what I move more of, so I'll have a better idea going into a con, like with my different styles of character classes. Be like, all right, I sell an absolute ton of bards, but nobody ever buys a monk, so I'm gonna make a monk and 9 bards. So it's been a kind of a blessing to kind of gather this data on what people actually want. Cause that's always, cause I've got stuff from like 20 years ago that I made that I thought would sell that did not.
Yeah, that's always the challenge. You're like, this is amazing. It's going to be so cool. Everyone is going to love this. And you're like, but I really love it.
Yeah. And it's one of those things like I've learned to prototype things now and just kind of crowdsource the community. I'll make one and I'll put it out there. And if people are like, yes, we're like, okay, we'll go forward on this. If I get one person that says I like, and it like 2 months later, I go, hey, do you still like this thing? Do you want it? Like, I'll give it to you. Like, I'll give it to you. Nobody else wanted it.
But honestly, that brings us back to our earlier topic of how you can't just walk into a community and say, buy my stuff. It really, like, once you have that relationship with a larger amount of people, like, they're the best people to go to say, hey, what do you think about this? Or what do you want to see? Like, so how much of your process would you say involves getting like community input?
I'd say like 99% of it, because I've picked up a fair group of artist mutuals that we constantly back and forth to each other. We'll send images and just be like, like, is this any good? And then once I get past that phase, and then I'll make one and put it on the internet and just be like, what about this? And so that's pretty much my design phase, is just like have strange idea, run strange idea past friend, run strange idea past community, and then go whichever direction with it.
Yeah. Do you ever do commissions?
I do a lot of commission work. A lot of people will send photos to me, and I'll convert a photo into a stencil and I'll etch it onto a glass. That is a time-consuming process. A lot of people will come to me because that's the niche where I live. Is you can get something put on a glass, but generally to get it for a decent most places now you got to order it by the gross. Like, it's hard to get like an etched glass piece that's like a one-off, unless you want to buy like a whole case of them. So I fill that little niche where people can be like, hey, I have this strange idea for a thing that I want. Can you make it? I'm like, yeah, I'll make one. That's fine. So I end up making some of the strangest items that well, I'm not sharing this on Twitter. I really hope they don't tag me in it, because
okay, but now I want to know.
yeah, this is some not safe for work stuff here. Thank you for your patronage, but yeah, I won't be retweeting this. Thank you. Once once Rule 34 Twitter gets a hold of you, you're in trouble. I made the mistake of that joke one time, be like, etched ludes are a thing, and I was like, oh god, now my inbox is just absolutely saturated with questions. I was a joke. It was a joke. I was a joke.
I know.
it was a joke. Because it's like, I'm not judging, but I don't want that to be my primary source of income.
Yeah, no, that's
I'm okay with that.
The occasional one, fine. That's not what I want to make all the time. Not what I want to be staring at all the time.
Well, it's like, that's something how do you commercially advertise for that? As a joke, I made quote unquote traveler stones just as a complete joke. And I'm like, what if I put a thing? What if I gestured a rock? What if I drew a thing on a rock, on a pretty rock? And everybody was like, haha, do it. So I was like, okay, I'll make just a fistful of them. And like, I felt so strange making the listing that in there, I repeatedly put, I need you to be fully aware of what you're purchasing, dear client, because I don't want you to get mad at me when you get this in the mail and it's not what you thought it was. It's actually this thing that I don't want. Please don't let your kids open them. Like, I'm just really uncomfortable with this. Please make sure this is what you really want.
How many of those did you sell?
Oh God, like 15 or 20. Like, not a lot, but enough to just be like, all right, okay, cool. And enough people were like, have heard me talk about it to where when they order it, they're like, I fully consent to you sending this to me. I understand what it is. I'm like, okay, cool. Because it's like, it legitimately gives me anxiety with stuff like that. Because I'm like, I don't want to accidentally send an engraving to somebody that's like, oh, what did I order? I thought this was for charity.
Yeah.
That's why that's the only thing I've ever commercially done like that. Because it's just like, that'll in and of itself just like gives me panic.
Fair enough.
So it's like, I don't even know how I would advertise that as an option.
Yeah.
Brown bag etchings.
So let's go back to what you do like to sell on a regular basis. So I know you've got a lot of the glassware, but then can you tell us a little bit about the tokens? And I've seen some ornaments and some of the other products.
A lot of that stuff is one of those, I'm just kind of perusing the internet and I'm like, oh, eventually found the ones that I'm using now. I just went on a giant internet rabbit hunt of glass tokens and I found just a gold mine. I was like, oh, bought a gross of them and just started playing with them. And I was like, oh, I can put a lot of stuff on these. And then, like with everything else, I just throw out a tweet. I'm like, what was it? What was the cleric bless tokens? I was like, bless tokens? Question mark. And everyone's like, yeah. I was like, okay, here we go. I guess I got to design a thing now. And then from there on, it just went to. I was looking at minis, and I was like, well, why do you see on all the virtual tabletops, everybody's got quote unquote tokens. I'm like, what if somebody doesn't want to paint a mini? What if they just want like a cool token? I'm like, okay, so now I got to design stuff to represent all of the different classes, or what if the DM wants something to use as like an in-game MacGuffin? Just some glass stones with strange arcane glyphs on them that they can show to their players or hand out to their players and just kind of enhance that tabletop experience, with something that like tangible they can get their hands on. I've talked about it before. It's like, I like to look at the tabletop and just be like, okay, what's missing? Like, gamers really we have our like little altar in front of us of our things, our little MacGuffins that we bring to the game space for whatever purpose they serve. And I was like, okay, so where's a little niche that I can, what do people need? Everybody's got a drink. So glassware, got that covered, and their tokens and MacGuffins and counters and things to keep track of stuff and just things that look cool. And so I'm trying to fill that need.
Which tokens would you say have been the most popular?
My character class tokens. I've moved quite a few of those.
Okay. So are people using those like instead of the minis? It's just, here's the bard, here's the cleric.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's nice because I've noticed like a lot of the dice vault makers now have the little section in the dice vaults that where you can stick a mini, and one of my tokens will fit in there.
Okay. So do they tend to be the same size as just a normal?
Yeah, about the same base size. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. One thing that I always kind of like to ask on these is what would you say has been the most challenging part of MC etching so far?
Balancing all of it. Just like as a one person made to order operation. Trying to cross platform and keep everything like moving efficiently.
Are you still doing everything in your garage?
Yep.
So how do you what's your process for fulfilling an order?
Well, if it's something that I have pre-designed, like, and Etsy just notifies me, hey, you sold a thing. If I have nothing else going, I'll just go into the computer, pull up that design, print it out or cut it out on the cutter, walk it over to my secondary workbench / because I've got in my shop, I've got my computer station. And then on the other side, I've got like a physical workstation where I do the glass work. I'll stick the design to some glass, weed it out, mask it off, run it through the sandblaster, zip out the door. If it's something I got a custom commission, like turn a photo into a stencil, I'll get up in the mornings. And that's one reason I Twitch stream in the mornings too, because like my sandblaster's loud and I don't want to be that neighbor. So it's like, I won't start actually etching anything until at least 10 o'clock. So, and I wake up like 3 a.m. every day. So from like probably about 5 or 6 a.m. till about 10, that's when I do my Twitch streaming. I do my design work, anything that's quiet. And then once it's done, it's just like everything else. I just get it cut out, get it slapped on glass and run it through.
How long are you spending on kind of each item or each order?
If you take my standard, the original class glasses that I did, that just say the character class and they have the little border design in the corner. Depending on, let's just say the bard, because the bard is just absolutely extra in the design. That probably takes me an hour and a half to 2 hours to cut, stick, weed, mask, blast, clean, pack, and ship.
And then what about for a commissioned piece?
For commissioned, I just got done with one set that I haven't even etched them yet. It's taken me 2 months to work on the photos.
Oh, wow.
Because it was 3 photo set that they needed turned into stencils to get etched onto pint glasses. And so it's taken me, and they're like older, smaller, really pixely photos because I pretty much got to go in and hand draw them as stencils. So it's about 2 months for 3 photos. And then now I'm at the process where I can cut them out and get them blasted. And that'll probably take me 2 hours to do that part. So I'm probably working on those about 4 to 5 hours a week. I was working on those 3 photos. And that's, just like any graphic artist, just a constant slew of like, yay, this is good. Walk away, come back. No, this is trash. Do it again.
Yeah. Brenton is the artist in our little 2-person business. And so there will definitely be days where I'm like, I need you to just say that it's done. It looks really good. I promise.
Yeah. It's one of those things. It's like, no, there's an errant pixel there that won't cooperate. We're taking it back to formula. And you're like, just why, brain? Why?
So when somebody does commission you, do you like how much of a lead time do you give yourself normally, or tell them that it's going to take to just give yourself enough time?
It really it's project to project. Like somebody sent me just a glyph that they had already done all the work on, and I'm like, oh, I can knock that out in a day. So I'll usually, when they say, when people ask me questions, I go, send me what you want and let me know what you want it on. And I will work you up an estimate once I have all the details. Because it really, like, etching starts to vary, not just with the image itself, but once you figure out what kind of glass you want to put it on, that really changes things.
What kind of options do you have?
Standard pint glasses, shot glasses, 16-ounce mugs, 26-ounce mugs, ceramic coffee cups, stemless wine glasses, stemmed wine glasses of anywhere between 10 and 17 ounces, Belgian beer glasses, brandy snifters. I've started, since I've gone, I guess, legit, I've started buying more stuff in bulk. I used to just drive around town and hunt up stuff all piecemeal. But consistently finding the same product got to be problematic. And so I just found a distributor online that had most everything I need for a decent price. And now I just order everything by the case. But once you start getting into compound curves on glass, your vinyl stencils don't want to stick to those without warping. And so it takes a lot of finesse, and sometimes you have to alter the image a little bit, just so that when it gets stuck on the glass, it kind of corrects itself. So it can be time consuming. And so you really need all of the details of, like, what kind of glass do you want it to go on? Like, what kind of image are we talking about? I can put like a tiny penny sized glyph on a super round piece of glass and it's no problem. But I can't, once it starts to get into the 1, 2, 3 inch size, trying to get it to evenly wrap to that compound curve of a glass surface, I don't know if you've ever tried to put like a sticker on something round, it starts to bubble and warp and fold.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's just trying to get that, you have to cut it apart and apply it in sections and make sure there's no gaps and the overlay is good and the image doesn't distort.
So have you kind of started to learn, even when you're at the point where it's still on the computer and you don't have the vinyl printed out yet, are there shapes that you try to avoid, or that after a certain amount of space, it's going to have to alter slightly?
Yeah, I can look at the size of an image and the type of glass they want it on and just be like, okay, this is how I'm going to have to do it. Like if it's something, let's just say a 3-inch by 3-inch square on a like something that's got a red wine glass, it's got more of a rounded shape to it. Like that's something I know from the get-go, I'm going to have to cut that up into 4 sections and apply them individually. If it's something that's got a little bit less of a curve, I've found that I can get away with using a heat gun and kind of conforming it carefully. So I can kind of gauge it in my head of how it's going to go. And there are definitely styles of glass I avoid.
Like what?
Anything like abnormally round. Unless they're like, they want very, very small etchings on it. Anything that the rounder and more detailed, it becomes exponentially more difficult the way I do things.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I'm just now sitting here thinking about a perfectly round glass ornament.
Yeah, and that's another thing too, is the thickness of the glass, can really have, like, pint glasses are great because they're just chunks. with straight sides. Glass, I tried the round ball glass ornaments one year, and like the way I do my sandblasting, it ate a hole right through it, like real quick. And so just like, well, that's a no-go.
Fair enough. So we've talked about, some of the challenges and just some of the things that you've had to learn over time. But what about rewarding? Like, what would you say is the most rewarding part of running MC Etching?
The collaborations. Those have been just the absolute best. The getting to interface and interact with people, like, and the collaborations with like artists I respect that get a hold of me, and I'm like, you want to what now? That the biggest, just absolute mind bending incident was Tess Fowler got a hold of me. Well, I did a gift piece for Tess Fowler when she started doing the D&D comic A Darkened Wish. And I'd been a fan of Tess forever. And so she had tweeted recently a newfound love of Scotch, and then a single panel from the upcoming comic with a picture of one of the characters' face, just black and white, and then with the body of the tweet saying "My good sweet son." And I was like, and there it is. I'm going to put that exact picture and those words on a Scotch glass as a gift, as kind of a thank you for your art. And so I did it just out of love and tweeted just sent her a picture and was like, I don't know if you're going to get mad for me DMing you, sorry, but like I made this because just your art inspires me. And I can totally understand if you don't want like random internet guy to mail something to you, but just, saying I made a thing. And she responded, was like, this is brilliant, and I'm going to need to commission 2 more pieces from you. And just like my jaw hit the ground.
What did she have you make?
2 more characters from the Darkened Wish, her Kenku character, and then the main female character. And thankfully on giant 26-ounce mugs, because they were detailed. Like full on her art translated into etched glass. Just a joy. And they were I hand cut them all. Some of my proudest work, and I'm so glad I got to collaborate with one of my favorite artists. And so, yeah, collaboration is like number one, the best thing with me. I've gotten to work with like Zero Reynolds. I did one of his D&D sigils, one on a piece for him, his Artificer sigil, and we did another one in conjunction as a giveaway, and that was a blast.
Is there anyone that if you could have the opportunity to kind of work with them on something that you would just lose your mind about, like who would that be?
Oh, that's hard because there's so many great artists out there that I absolutely love. Let's see, what is it? Just like Galactic Jonah on Twitter is I'm a big fan. Oh, that's hard. Like, because literally any artist out there. I'm a huge hype lord when it comes to artists. Like I just fanboy over any art so bad that it's really hard for me to. I've got a few mutuals. Mia Mercury Art on Twitter. I would love to do a collab with her. She does amazing work. My friend Darby, Pixel Justice on Twitter. Him and I have collaborated before, and I'd like to do more again. We did a giveaway of people. He would do portraits of people or caricatures of people in Animal Crossing art. And we did a giveaway where he did that art for somebody and I etched it on a mug for them. And I would love to do, because he does this series of small buildings that are the cutest. And I would love to do a wall hanging etching of some of his small building stuff.
Have you made other wall hangings? Like how large?
Not extremely large, maybe like 3 foot by 3 foot. I'm limited to my size with my sandblaster. In my head, I have designs to turn a shed into a walk-in sandblaster someday so that I can do like, I want to do large pieces, but generally like the big wall hangers for me, maybe like 2 foot by 2 foot, like mirror tiles. I do a fair few of mirror tiles. Those are fun because you can etch the front and get like a reflected frosted glass, or you can actually etch off the reflective backing and then paint it a color. So that way the mirror is still smooth to the touch, but it's got like colored designs and whatnot.
That sounds really pretty, really cool.
Yeah, those are, I haven't done one in a while. Mostly because I'm terrified to ship them because they're so thin. I used to do a long time ago for Side Cash. People that had classic cars that they would enter into car shows a lot. They would bring me back when, some of the older model cars that had wind wings on them. They would bring me the wind wing and I would put the car owner's information on it so that when judges were going around the car show or people that liked the car could get information on the owner and the vehicle. It was just permanently etched onto the wind wing of their car.
That's cool.
There's a lot of there's so many things that can be etched. Like I do glass, I do ceramic, I do metal, I do acrylic. It's a pretty fun medium. Just look around and be like, I think I can etch that. And that's pretty much been a genesis for a lot of stuff. Is like, what? I think I can etch that.
Is there any material that's like harder or easier than the other to etch on? Or like what kind of considerations do you have to take into account?
Metal, with metal, you're not gonna get as deep of an etch, and it kind of doesn't show as brightly as it does on anything else. Ceramics, if it's a good ceramic and it's a dark color, you can usually surface etch it and it'll show. If it's duller at all, you have to actually eat past the enamel on the outside and get to this, like to the actual ceramic core of it to get it to show. So you got to eat you got to sandblast like 1/8 of an inch into this cup. And that's time consuming. You just sit there for like an hour pointing a sandblaster at a coffee cup, just slowly etching away. Acrylic's a little hard to show up sometimes. So you got to spend a little bit of time. I'd have to say the ceramic is the worst. Just the sheer amount of time you got to sit there. Because if you crank up the sandblaster to too high of a pressure, it'll eat away your stencil.
Oh.
Yeah. So you've got to find that sweet spot of like, this is going to blast fast enough that I don't have to stand here all day, but it's also not going to eat away the vinyl the second I pull the trigger on this thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you have any upcoming projects that you're excited about and able to talk about?
I'm trying to do like at least an 8-hour workday stream so people can kind of get a feel for the life of the independent. I've got my shop wired up for video, so you'll literally be able to watch me edit stuff on my computer, make designs, spit it out on the cutter, go over to my shipping station / workstation and do that, and then watch me sandblast. I mean, people keep saying like, "Oh, we want to see this," and I'm just like, just forewarning, it's like watching paint dry. Like it's just me walking back and forth, but I'm very animated like all the time. And so I'm hoping it'll be at least somewhat entertaining. I'm probably going to try and do a charity thing in conjunction with it. Once I figure out how to do that. And then maybe add in some like challenges. I don't know, like channel points. Like I'll do some jumping jacks or something. I don't know. Something kilt related. People seem to like that.
Yes, they do. How long have you been on Twitch?
On Twitch? Oh, man. Not long at all. A few months actively.
Okay.
Like I think maybe I've had the account. Well, I've had the account for years and years. I did a Twitch stream maybe about a year or so ago. And then for the last couple of months, I've been actually doing scheduled streams.
Yeah, I mean, those biddies and channel points, dude, tend to be crowd pleasers. Can always do some fun things with that.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I love community engagement. I love anything. People seem to like. I just do real chill streams where we just tell childish jokes and we're silly and we giggle a lot. I giggle a lot. I know it's like I find myself a lot with the Twitch stuff. Whenever I find something cool, my Twitch audience is very much that like, oh, I can't wait to show. I found this cool thing. I can't wait to show everybody at Twitch. And I love waking up the next morning and be like, yo, look what I found.
Well, I want to say thank you for kind of hopping on and chatting with me today. Where all can people find you?
Primarily Twitter at MC_etching, Instagram at Punkle Nix. If you're into the himbo thing, that's where I've kind of constrained all of that, as silly as it is. If you're into kilt stuff, that's mostly Instagram. Etsy.com/shop/MC Etching. for like the majority of my sales stuff. I have a really garbage website at mcetching.com. It's pretty much just a gallery. I've got everything separated out by genre of stuff. Twitch.tv/Punkle Nix, and that's pretty much the areas that I frequent.
Okay, I actually did want to ask and forgot. What is the story behind Punkle Nix?
That really kicked off a lot of like quote unquote Twitter recognition. As I did a post a while back, I want to say it was close to a year ago, that because I've always been a punk rock kid, like always. And I was feeling some kind of way one day, and I just jumped on. As a matter of fact, I think it was like almost exactly a year ago. And I was like, the holidays are coming up. A lot of people out there have a lot of real garbage family members that just treat you terribly. And I just told them, look, it's your punk rock uncle here. Don't let your dad dump all over you, telling you you're doing everything wrong. I remember when he was a complete, screw up like the rest of us. So just remember that you're loved and you don't have to be perfect. And like that just blew up, and everybody's just like, can you be my uncle? I'm like, as long as it's not like in a creepy way, sure. And so, yeah, that just kind of took off, and I just kind of embraced it.
Well, thank you so much for being, the amazing Punkle Nix within our community, and for always being so supportive for everyone. It's just so nice, honestly. But yeah, thank you for jumping on with me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was a blast. I love doing stuff like this.
That's it for today's episode of Roll, Play, Grow. To check out the show notes, you can go to lightheartadventures.com/RPG. To keep up with every episode, please subscribe on your podcast player of choice. And if you're enjoying the show, please leave me a review. Reviews are one of the best ways to help a newer podcast get up off the ground. To follow me on Twitter, you can either find me at LightheartADV for our business account, or at Ketra, WCR, to see me tweet about other things like my dog and World of Warcraft. You can also find us as Lightheart Adventures on both Instagram and Patreon. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next week on Roll, Play, Grow.